So what came first, scuba diving or aquatic animal minds?
The crucial event was a kind of meeting of the philosophical side and the scuba diving side in a way that seems odd to me now. I'd spent decades thinking about evolution and life, and to some extent, well, and the mind, and to some extent, animal minds, simpler sorts of minds. But I didn't know any particular animals that well. There was no group of animals who I felt I really understood a little bit. And then at a certain stage, I began spending a bit more time in Australia. I was still working in the US and began coming back in the northern summers and began diving and snorkeling in a particular patch of water, a small sanctuary near Sydney, and encountered giant cuttlefish, not for the very first time, but the first time I'd spent time with them. I knew what they were and immediately thought, okay, this is an amazing animal. I have to learn about this animal. I then encountered octopuses in the same water, and there's a lot more known about octopuses than giant cuttlefish. So although the physical encounter was with mostly initially with giant cuttlefish, I mean, one should picture these animals. They're big animals, 2 feet to 3 feet long in some cases, continually changing color. They can produce just about any color. There are a few shades they don't seem to quite manage. Dark blue, I think they're still working on, but pretty much anything else you will see. And they just run through these extraordinary color and pattern changes in front of you, or just for their own reasons. They also have a kind of inquisitive orientation to divers, and especially snorkelers in some cases. You can tell there's a lot of something going on inside. So I thought, right, these guys are important. They're important because they're so complicated and so spectacular, but also so distant from us in evolutionary terms. The common ancestor was very far back, very simple, and that made them seem an important animal. So from that point on, my philosophical work connected with the actual experiences with wildlife, especially in the water, especially scuba diving. And that sequence of events really changed the path of my career.
One, it's surprising that of all the colors, the cuttlefish haven't managed to get down dark blue, because one would assume, to the extent that this is a useful tool for camouflage, I know it's also useful for communication, but you'd think that in the ocean, dark blue would be a good color to have in your repertoire.
Yeah, the camouflage colors that they're really good at are sort of seaweed type colors and sand colors. I mean, it's amazing watching one of these animals. They look like a kind of jet propelled octopus turtle hybrid sometimes, and they're sort of cruising across the reef. And as they go over the top of seaweed, they'll be a kind of blotchy green. Then they'll cross a patch of sand, and they're just immediately sand colored. So those are the great camouflage colors. And then you have a lot of reds and oranges and yellows and dark colors, greens, which, no one really knows why they're producing that kind of range of colors. Some of it is for, I think, intraspecific signaling, competition. Some of it's probably meant to startle potential threats. There are some weird patterns they do when they're hunting. But these are quite mysterious animals.
Just to give some context for our listeners, if they want to read your books, I mean, what we're talking about right now, Cuttlefish, we'll get to Octopuses, Consciousness Minds, that's contained in Other Minds. And then this is part of a trilogy, Metazoa being the second book, and Living on Earth being the third, which, I mean, we'll get to eventually. But one of the things that I was taken with in Other Minds is all of these stories of scuba diving and interactions with cuttlefish and octopuses. And it is very clear that you form you describe them as kind of alien creatures, but you still form a relationship with some of them. And I think it would be interesting just to hear one or two stories from your scuba diving career that might make more salient for our listeners why you just were so interested in the other minds of these creatures.
Sure. There's a combination of phenomena involving contact and recognition, and phenomena involving a kind of deep separation. I found that extremely interesting. The fact that some giant cuttlefish would have an interest in me. I gave some of them names based on their sort of bodily designs and their color preferences.
Artists' names.
Yeah, Matisse was a specialist in very bright kind of washes of color, especially yellow. There's one called Kandinsky.
Brancusi.
Favored red. And then Brancusi was more of a sort of body shape specialist than a color specialist. And in some of these cases, you really felt you had some contact with them. On a few occasions, I'd reach out a hand cautiously, and the animal would I don't like to touch them if they're just in a particular position, but if you put your hand with the glove off somewhere where they can reach, sometimes they'll just touch you once and then back off again. A sort of moment of curious contact, and then they're back off again. And that, of course, was always very exciting. There are other situations where you're in the water with the animal, and in a very puzzling way, the animal is just determined not to recognize your existence. You do not exist from their point of view. You can plant yourself right in front of them, a big animal, bigger than them, and they'll do everything they can to avoid, not that they're aggressive, it's just, you are not here. You are not part of my environment, which I did find interestingly disconcerting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that combination, the sort of moments of contact, of curiosity, and the moments of a kind of profound refusal to recognize, I think they capture the combination of familiarity and alienness to some extent.